Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for coming out to Near Day. Got an interesting panel for you here today. Talking about Near being present multi-chain. We can't just talk about it. We have to talk about it and talk to other chains about it. So please welcome our panelists from Calimero, from DAO, from Aurora, and from Rev Finance. So we have an interesting little setup here of chairs. I'm kind of more used to one chair per panelist, but interestingly enough, sitting next to me we have DAO, and then we have the Near ecosystem on the couch. So I'm kind of glad I have my own chair, kind of fun. To start the morning off, let's ask a question to Rev Finance and see how Rev Finance might see some of the stuff that we want to discuss, right? Appchain economics in general. This is an advanced panel, so we're not going to spend all the time talking about what app chains are. You should know that an app chain is an application-specific blockchain, right? So knowing that there are needs for Near tokens, there are needs for stable coins, there's needs for governance outside of Near, connected to Near. For Rev Finance, that means interoperability with Aurora. It means interoperability with Octopus to some degree. You can call it interop, but it's really just us using the contracts. So from a Rev Finance perspective, when you look at new liquidity coming in from other chains and from places like Aurora, what are the first things that you think about when we have to integrate these other economies and make them make sense on a non-monolithic L1?
Yeah, so quick background about Rev Finance. Rev is the leading DEX on Near, and I'm Ray, researcher on Rev Finance. So replying to the questions, I think how Appchain can come into play, especially in DeFi, is kind of the problem that Appchain solve, right? Which is scalability after all. So just like how DYDX is kind of recently announcing moving on to Cosmo with Appchain idea, I think similarly, with the additional scalability and gas reduced in gas speed, it really helps kind of increase liquidity and volume being traded on DeFi, which is one barrier that differentiates between DeFi and CeFi. And especially, when it comes to bridging, I think this is one very interesting mechanism that to be considered where, there's all these different chains and all these different tokens. How do you really bridge from one token to another and across chains? And I think this is a really good approach using Appchain.
Fairly said. So there's a lot of different implications from managing that capital to being responsible for allowing that capital to be present in the exchange. On a DEX, we don't necessarily permission and allow things, but there's still the question of, who made the decision, who's liable, who's responsible. So relative to that, I want to ask Jake from DAO. There's a lot of liquidity moving around in Cosmos right now, some stuff that we've discussed not relevant to this panel, but I'd like to know how you see something like a non-monolithic L1 DEX like Rev Finance being integrated potentially with other app chains, because when I think about that in the way that I've experienced it, it's very small. It's in kind of a niche.
Well, the interchain is Near. So, there's this thing called IBC, or Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol, and it's pretty sick. It's what makes all these app chains work. It's why you can have a DEX like Osmosis, and anyone can launch a new app chain and they can permissionlessly create a bridge to Osmosis with IBC. And you can do more things over IBC, like control accounts over IBC. So like with DAO, interchain DAO tooling, you can actually have accounts on all these different blockchains and do anything an account would do on that chain, like cross-chain over IBC. So a DAO on Juno network, for example, can control an account on Osmosis and LP its tokens. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and one of the things that I'm really excited about is to bring Near and the great technology at Near and the great projects at Near to the interchain. And then that also means it brings the interchain to Near. And then Osmosis, Juno, DAO token, like Stargaze, like all these different app chain projects can be listed on your DeFi products.
And I think it's really interesting to ask Boris from Aurora about this, because on Aurora, you guys are effectively the first non-Near platform to have integrated directly with Rev. So I think it's interesting that Aurora relaunched its validator recently, and some things have become more stable about the bridge back to Ethereum. I wonder if you have any comments on this, or you have any thought how this might affect future dynamics, because I can see how Aurora kind of has prime placement. The liquidity for projects on Aurora is present effectively before these other app chains. So as a large entity adjacent to Ref, adjacent to DEXs on Near, how do you see other smaller applications that are their own infrastructure competing for capital? Because that's the first point that we talk about in security, right, for interchain security.
Well, I think as we open more, we give more series of new tools that allow more and more event-compatible Appchains, try to bring liquidity into Aurora and into Near. I think we can, it's part of what we're trying to achieve. It's still in the works, but I think with the Aurora Plus and all other new layers are working on it, I think it will happen, right? I think there might be some challenge on communication between application chains, but I think we will be working on that. I think the rails are there, the low gas, the fast transactions are there. We just need to grow the environment, let know everyone who wants to launch their own app chains, they can do it, they can go through us. And yeah, I think it's there that we are getting there.
Fairly said. So, Sandy, not to leave you out in the cold, I have to ask you also about Calimero, because Calimero effectively can be read as app chains of Near on Near. I know that's grossly oversimplifying, but bear with my bad analogy. From an economic perspective, to my understanding, Calimero doesn't have as much of an economic need the way some other public app chains might, because Calimero uses private, right? Calimero is specifically for a validator set that is not supposed to be for the public, it's not supposed to be permissionless, and that's perfectly fine. So getting back from that space of permission structures to the permissionless chain, permissionless DEX, what do you think that means for the same liquidity that we're all competing for, the same capital attention that we're all competing for, where some of those operators just don't compare about the public capital?
Yes, so from my perspective, Calimero is a sidechain built on top of Near. And we are targeting more like Web 2.5 use cases, like enterprises, OTC trades, dark pools. And I don't think necessarily we are competing with the public DeFi ecosystems, but bringing more like new liquidity, probably, for institutions who didn't invest in crypto before. Obviously, institutions are not adopting blockchains right now because of privacy reasons, because of regulatory reasons, and we are kind of trying to build a sidechain which enables them to do so. So in the future, we'll have like asset tokenization, new liquidity of like different assets, stable coins, CBDCs, and I think it's just going to expand both our business but also the DeFi business in general.
That's fair. That makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask further to bounce back from private chains back to interchain security, because Cosmos is doing a bunch of interesting things that are going to become more important to us at Near as NEP 364 gets finalized, as some of this other IBC work gets a little bit more structured. I'm really happy to see that some ICSs are sort of misunderstood. ICS 10 and 11 is what we've been interfacing with at Octopus. We're excited to get that finalized so we can help contribute to part of that for the ICS deployment on Near. But more importantly, when I think about the future of Near and how it wants to be multi-chain in these capital relationships with other entities, I can think of how on mapofzones.com I see liquidity moving between different chains on Cosmos. In Near, we might experience that a little bit differently because a popular DEX is a more popular place for people to go instead of bringing their capital directly to the application. So what do you think the interchain security motivation is for investors? Because when I want to see multi-chain applications, the first thing that people tell me is, I don't want to see it. I'd rather have one token, one place. Easy mode is what I like. I like simple. Don't think too hard. How do you respond to this?
There's a lot there. First of all, I cannot wait to see Near on the map of zones in the interchain and see all the interchain liquidity flowing to Near. It's going to be sick. I think your question is about maybe concentrated liquidity. Do you have your protocol in one place, or do you spread it out as much as possible?
You can totally left turn and go replicated security if you want. I'm leaving you an open field.
Oh yeah, replicated security is shit. Mesh security though is really interesting. So Osmosis and Juno Network are working on mesh security, and it's quite similar to Eigenlayer. It's like a cross-staking protocol. This is something where you could, Near has an incredible high market cap, What if you could stake your near on near, get your near rewards, and then cross-stake it to secure a lot of these app chains on the interchain and earn those app chain tokens on top of your near staking rewards? Mesh security is something that I would be really happy to talk with anyone in the near realm about, because I think it's incredibly awesome. You can provide a high level of economic security, and yet it's built in such a way that it doesn't demand you use the Cosmos SDK. And so, yeah, I'm really,
Excellent.
really excited for mesh security. Replicated security, meh, like whatever.
Heard, excellent. So to that, I'll take a left turn and ask Sandy about this because it's a completely inappropriate question for you, which is one to ask you in particular. What is it called? CRS, CSR, whatever they call it? Canto has become popular for this feature. Near already was giving 30% of spend on a transaction back to the author of the contract. I wonder how Calimero sees this motivation where part of the base layer on Near was to pay back the author of a contract, but that's not really necessary when you're running your own chain and your economics are kind of segmented from an L1.
I mean, on Near, I think it's pretty great that we have 30% of gas fees go to developers because it incentivizes developers to build good contracts, and essentially, a business model is baked into the protocol itself. So, like, if your contract is very used, you get paid instantly. For Calimero, obviously, we are, a gas-free network. So, like, the validators don't have a token. It's standard, like, proof of stake or proof of authority network. Depends how you set it up. It's customizable. But the token is just for consensus. It's not for, monetary value. In my opinion, in the future, we're going to see more and more networks and more app chains who are not secured by monetary incentive, but also from proof of community incentive or, legal frameworks between different companies in consortium networks, or, for example, DAOs. Like, you can have a multi-sig DAO of 5 people. Instead, you can write a private shard of 5 people having the same voting power, and then you can have smart contracts between them. You can, deploy maybe exchanges between them. You can have treasury management, private voting. And I really see, that's where the future is going, in my opinion. And that's why we I worked at Near. I joined 3 years ago. I joined as an infrastructure engineer. And now we're just building, infrastructure more for standard businesses on top of Near. So that's how I see it,
So I think that is a different narrative from a capital management perspective than most other ecosystems and chains, right? So Boris, at Aurora, there's also a pretty different take, right? Like Aurora Plus, when I first saw that, I said, oh, okay, that's great. I can onboard people more easily. And over time, I started to understand better. Aurora Cloud and these other offerings and these other engagements, they're designed to meet the market in a way that the market is sort of more ready for, right? So that said, how do you see capital in Aurora making sense for multi-chain applications, for people on Near, for entities who want to just build on Aurora, but also want to be able to move their liquidity to other places, get functionality from other places?
Well, how I see it, if we can create all this, the Aurora Plus, the cloud, all this, to bring more. I mean, my how I see it is we have a set of tools that are set to bring more liquidity. I think that being an EVM compatible, we create a good environment to this step change. So it's attractive to come. There are other things like meta transaction. We can do that construction. We can bring the gamers. I think we can be a good place like to entry to the Near ecosystem. But beyond the Near ecosystem, I think we are a place that they can have all that we need to bring enough their applications. I think there's a good use case for gaming, a lot of good cases for DeFi. So I think it will make sense to come a place that they can get, and you can also bridge Ethereum, you can bridge into Near. So I think we have the basics, and the more than the basics, the next level. So I think it's a good place that they can bring their capital, and I think it will happen.
Fair. So I want to pivot to our youngest panelist, Ray. And Ray, I want to ask you about this because of your experience at Ref and what you might see in the future, because at an entity like Osmosis, there is much less management required when someone comes up and wants to have a capital engagement. I'm not saying that Ref is permission. I'm saying that somebody is managing contracts somewhere. There's always some liability, right? So to that sense, how would you like to see app chains connecting up with Near? Because I could see them linking with IBC immediately and looking for liquidity on Ref. That is a different engagement than they're used to on Osmosis. So I'd like to know what you see for the future of Appchain economics on Near.
Yeah, so I think, let's think back, like, what is the primary kind of idea behind, like, a DEX or AMM as a whole, right? It's meant to be a medium of exchange in the network, right? So on Near, we are the kind of token exchange for all sorts of communication, be it Aurora, Juno Network, or so on and so forth. Now, regarding Appchain specifically, I can kind of put it into two aspects, micro and macro. When it comes to the micro perspective, I think there will be more and more people building on different app chains, which then relates to the fact that there will be potential tokens, which will then connect back to Ref Finance, a DEX, which allows you to exchange token through app chains. I think this is really important for kind of what Ref is supposed to do. Now, on a higher level, on a macro perspective, I think Appchain is extremely critical and important for mass adoption, especially when it comes to gaming, like Boris had mentioned. You want users, Web2 users, to seamlessly use Web3 without even knowing it, right? I think this can be really well done by, for example, gaming on app chains, for example. And this is how, mass adoption will come in for blockchains.
Fairly said. Well, I don't think we have too much time left, but I don't want to be the moderator that makes you guys say the thing that we want to say. So I want to hear from y'all. What is the thing that you're excited about? I know we all have some different announcements that we're looking at. In this kind of bear market, everybody makes their announcements around ETHDenver, right? So whatever you're looking at next, if we could go down the line, I think our audience would love to know what's interesting in our world.
Well, I'm actually not going to talk about Juno 2.0. I'm going to talk about the things that are relevant to Near, that I'm excited about. So IBC, I think IBC can open up a whole world of permissionless, like bridging and interchain goodness that would allow DEXs like yours to access more tokens more easily. No need to make custom bridges all the time, like everything's standardized. Moreover, it opens up possibilities for protocols like mesh security. I would really love to get Near involved with mesh security. A real cross-ecosystem proof-of-stake, shared security model, I think could be really powerful for decentralization, but also great for token holders, especially high market cap chains that can provide a lot of economic security, and then also provide Near stakers with additional rewards. That's pretty exciting. So I'm just excited about those two things. IBC, because it's the best cross-chain communication protocol, and mesh security because it's a really interesting, emerging, shared security protocol for the interchain.
Heard. You're up again, Ray. Go for it. What are you looking at next? What do you think is interesting coming to Ref, to Near, crypto in general, whatever you have your eyes on?
Yeah, so for Ref, we have recently launched Fee 2. So kind of basically, it's a model known as discretized concentrated liquidity, where users can provide concentrated liquidity in order to place limit orders. So the goal of a DEX or Ref specifically is to kind of have the best user's experience, modeling off like a centralized exchange, right? Following what happened last year, we can see there's a lot of point of failure with centralization. So if we can replicate not even 100% or 80 to 90% of what a CeFi can do, then I think we're pretty successful on that point.
I'll challenge you a little bit on that because my net point to every cab, Uber, Lyft driver that I've been with since I got here was, hey, that curly-haired guy, we're not associated with him, he didn't do this stuff. It was on-chain data that made it possible to break that problem before it got worse. So just because we're not going to talk about it, I had to put a little ish on it, but we can keep moving. Boris, I'd love to know what you find interesting at Aurora because I've lost track of some of the offerings y'all have. There's a lot coming out. Please tell us what to look for next at Aurora.
Well, I'm personally excited of how we will improve user experience by using all my very particular investment in the kind of abstraction part, but then is the other Aurora Plus, the cloud and things. I think this will allow us to move more the value out of mere speculation. So the apps per se will be able to generate more value to investors and stuff, more than just I like DeFi, but I think we should move money a little more out of DeFi into the application per se, the games. I'm very into the gaming part. So I'm excited about that. I think I'm excited to see how we can get developers to improve user experience, how they can make it easier for users to do DeFi in another way using Aurora Plus, and how other, more on the business side can use other products like the cloud and stuff like that. But I think in general, I think we will be improving the user experience and increasing adoption and moving value out of a little bit of speculation to the apps per se.
Fair. Sandy, is there any NEPs you want to tell us about, or anything coming from Calimero? Just want to give you your piece to tell us about it.
Two things. So I have a presentation in 1 hour. I invite everybody to join and learn more about Calimero. One sneak peek, we are working with Aurora guys to bring EVM support to Calimero as well. And the thing which I'm excited about is really enterprise adoption and Web 2.0 use cases coming up in the future. Because my belief is if we don't do that, blockchain will not survive. So if you want to learn more, presentation in 1 hour, and see you guys.
Fairly said. Well, thank you guys so much for coming up. We appreciate your time. Been a pleasure to do it again next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.